Good evening, Pendle Community Church. I wanted to share with you some thoughts I've had on my mind for a few days. Really something that I hope will help us in these coming days to think about God and the Bible and our lives and to really allow God to speak to us. I hope this challenge does that for you, and what it is really a challenge to cultivate a biblical imagination. I've always believed that the best way to understand the Bible, to really get something from it, to really engage with it, is to develop and cultivate a biblical imagination where we place ourselves in the shoes of the characters that we're reading about, when we allow our imaginations to travel back in time to those times in which they lived and what it was like and what it must have felt like and what life was like for them. And so what I want to do is I want to challenge you to think about maybe a favourite Bible character or somebody you would really love to explore their world and what it was like and how God spoke to them and what they did and what they felt like and what questions you would ask them. And so I want to set us off by sharing one of my favourite characters with you, which is Elijah. When I was a young Christian, I picked up a book by a man called Jeff Lucas, an Anglican minister and a great speaker and communicator. Many of you may have heard of him, and he wrote this fantastic book called Elijah, Anointed and Stressed. And just that title alone made me want to read that book. So I bought the book and I read it, and it plunged me into Elijah's world. And I became fascinated by this man who was from nowhere really in Israel, this tiny village called Tishbe, which they couldn't even find on the later maps when they tried to discover where he was on ancient maps. People doing research couldn't even find this place. It was so tiny. And he grew up there, and he was out in the wild, and he dressed like a wild man, camel hair coat and leather belt tied round him, and God spoke to him and said, "Go and challenge Ahab, this wicked puppet king, and his wife Jezebel, this evil, cruel woman who was bringing witchcraft and darkness into the land." And Elijah, from this tiny no place, was called by God to go and challenge them. And I'd want to say to Elijah, what did it feel like? How did God speak to you? What did it feel like to challenge the king and then to have to run away and go into hiding? And then what did it feel like to have to stand before the nation and challenge these false prophets, 400 of them who were against you on your own? And how did God speak to you? And how did you know God would answer? And what did it look like? And what happened in that situation, and what did you feel? And then, to go through all that experience, and then to run away from the king because the queen had threatened to kill him. And what did it feel like to be depressed and feel lost and feel far from God when you were in the desert and you were heading for this cave in the far reaches of the desert to try and find God, and hopefully God would speak to you? What did you feel like? How did you feel when God appeared to you? What did that feel like? And what did you experience? And what was that cave like? And how did you know that the still small voice was the voice of God? How did you know that? And what did it feel like when God spoke to you and gave you a new destiny and a new hope? And how did you feel when God told you would have Elisha as your successor? And what did all that feel like, Elijah? And what did you learn? What were the experiences that you had? What did you learn about hearing God and trusting him and experiencing him? And these are all the questions that I would ask Elijah, and I would ask him, what were the mistakes you felt you made, and what were the things you could have done differently? So I would want to plunge into the life of Elijah, and I would want to know what he felt and thought and experienced and learnt, and how he grew, and what he would say to me today, what he would say to me to help me on my journey with God. So that's my biblical character, and that's my biblical imagination, trying to find what his world was like. So I challenge you in the coming days to post your stories, your thoughts, your characters on here and share what you feel about them and what questions you would ask them and what you've learnt from them and reading about them. So please take up the challenge, church. I think it'll be wonderful if many of us can do this, and we'll all learn from each other, and it'll help us explore our Bibles together in new ways and learn new things. So I hope that's been good and bless you all. I'm so blessed that you're all encouraging one another online and through the Zoom meetings and watching the Sunday streaming services. Church, you are so faithful, and I really feel so privileged. We do as a family to be part of our wonderful church, and hope to see you again in the flesh soon. But for now, let's share online and let's share our stories and encourage one another. Amen.